Thank you very much. A very engaging presentation. And now I would like to open the discussion and welcome questions from the floor to our guest speakers. Please go ahead if you want to come here to speak.
I am Valerio Massimo Minale, and I work in Italy, and I teach Roman law in Milano, Roman trade law. I have a question, or maybe better, a suggestion to my colleague Silvia Schiavo. Thank you for your very interested contribution. I think that I'm totally agree with the fact that during late antiquity, and especially the Byzantine period, a long period, the term peregrinus acquired an ideological meaning. Sure, because it's very difficult to find a real peregrinus, because the border of the Roman Empire are the border of the world. So even if there are, for example, the Persians, the great enemy of Rome. But maybe could be interesting also to reflect about the problem of the heresy, so the heretical problem, and to how can I say, to consider not only the physical border of the Roman Empire, but also the religious border, because during late antiquity we have a totally Christianized Roman Empire, and especially during the Byzantine period. For example, I've studied the Manichaeans problem, but with all the heresy, I think, for example, to the Christological problem, the problem of the monophysism. For example, if you read the sources, the monophysist movements comes from Alexandria of Egypt, comes from Antiochia of Syria, and they are always presented as something of strange, something of strangers. So with the Manichaean problem, this is typical, because the Manichaeans are always Persians, so they are really considered outside the Roman border, the Roman Christian border. I think this also the heretical problem could be very, 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 very interesting in this argument that I think is one of the, how can I say, the most important argument now in our subject. The problem of the borders, the problem of the strangers, and the ideological meaning of strangers and so on. So, thank you so much.
Thank you for your suggestion. And it was a limit of my paper, but I know there are all these phenomenon, but I decided, just for a question of time, to refer to expulsions of peregrini intended as strangers, not for religious or philosophical motivations, but just for economic and social alarm. So this was a methodological idea I had starting writing this paper. This is the reason why I didn't talk about the problems you suggested me to take into consideration. Anyway, thank you very much for your suggestion. Okay.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Please.
Hello, Ilya Kotler, University of Edinburgh. First of all, should I ask all the questions at once, or wait for everyone to ask to the response?
Ask the question.
I mean, should I ask all the questions at once, or should I wait for everyone to answer?
Maybe for 2 questions.
Okay, I've got 3 questions, so I'm going to ask them all in a bulk. So, Dmitry, first, yeah. No, I've lost you, sorry. My question is a simple one. It's about Ugo Matei's classification of countries by the criteria of legal development. You told us that in his opinion, in the Western Europe, the legal development was more professionalized, while in the Eastern Europe it was more politicized. Am I right? So just the question is just what was the border between Western and Eastern Europe in his opinion? So let me ask other questions and then you can answer it. The second question is to Martin. Sorry. So I've seen this chart you provided us with. So, and the question is simple. According to it, in the fifth year, the students were supposed to choose whether to study private law or public law, because there was one option is books 37 to 45, which is private law, if I remember it right, and the second option for the students was book 46 to 50, which was mainly public law. So was there private public law specialization in Justinian's plan? Am I right? So and the third question, it is to Oliver Unger. Yes, of course. You mentioned that there is an analogy of actio funeraria in common law. So whom was it against? Against the executor, I guess. So yeah, that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Try to be brief about the classifications, or rather taxonomy of Ugo Mattei. That was an attempt of the Italian comparatists to focus on the predominant criterion for the classifications. The professional law is the law where the matters of law are settled primarily by the professionals, not influenced by politicians or the religious one, the religious factor. In that case, the border between East and West is the border of the expansion of Roman law, its reception, and the prominent role of the scholars and their influence on the legislators and in the education of the judiciary. Does it answer your question? He focuses on the contemporary issue. From that issue, Eastern European is more political one. I tried to expand, to transplant his classification and apply it to the historical issues, and it might work differently.
I can be equally short as the question was. In the fifth year, both parts were optional. So in this sense, there was no distinction. In the sense that they form two separate parts of the digest, there was. So in terms of the curriculum, there was no distinction between private and public law. As I told, in the second year, there was two separate pathways set out in the curriculum, either via the rebus or either via legal proceeding, de judicis. So you could approach the same legal system from the legal process or from the legal institutions. It is for the students of advanced law to study, it seems, according to the Constitutio Omnem, study on their own the sixth and seventh part of the law. There was no formal education provided for that. But we can't know anything about it because we have the project and the plan. We don't have the tapes and the recordings of and the lecture notes from the law schools.
Yes, you're right. The defender's the executor.
Other questions?
first steps of Christianity, the alternative Christianity, was somehow challenging this kind of concept in Roman or everyday Roman life. So sort of when Christianity, or the early Christianity, is kind of starting to arrive in Rome, maybe this was kind of a
Yeah, thank you very much. That's absolutely the point. And I mean, once Christianity arrived, there's huge inversion of concepts of corpus cadaver. What is actually the purpose of burial, and what are the dangers of not burying somebody? And so there's actually also one reason why I'm restricting my research on the period before Christianity steps in, because otherwise it gets just too complicated to go by, and the concepts are.
So the discussions are more related to Christianity, or even to the very early steps of Christianity, not all covering the period of
No, there's no in the period. I'm particularly looking at the early I mean, the late second half of the 1st century BC. So the time Augustus steps in. That's really my reason. Of course, I've got to integrate sources which are from later stages, the Ulpian source. But I'm always trying to use these later sources to reach back into earlier times.
It's a bit awkward to come here. I have one question to Oliver. It was really interesting to see how the existing person becomes a non-existing person. So it occurred to me that you can make a comparison to the other end of the life, how the non-existing person becomes an existing one. I listened to an exciting paper about abortion, and there's and to see until what time the fetus in the belly becomes a living person, it would give you some input to understand the transition on the other end of the life.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for these interesting talks, and I have a question for Sylvia Xgavo, because I was very interested by your paper, because I'm working on the 19th century where this divide between nationals and non-nationals becomes very paramount in Western Europe, for example. And I'm interested in these legal practices of identificating people as nationals. And you were talking about expulsion primarily, and you also mentioned at one point that there were certain practices of identificating people, and I might have missed something about that, and I would like you to maybe develop a bit more on that, what in Roman times were these practices. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So the practical of identification was important for organizing, obviously, these expulsions. We have not so many information about them, but we can say anyway something. For instance, from the literary sources, Ambrosius and Ammianus, we have no information about it. The most important information get out from the constitution of the Codex Theodosianus, the one by Valentinianus, relating to students arriving to Rome. We know from this constitution that the students had to get authorization, a written authorization from the provincial governors of the provinces they came from, in a form of a letter that were delivered to the Officium Censuale. The Officium Censuale collaborated with the Prefectus Urbi in Rome for anagraphical purposes. So we know there were these letters of authorization. From the constitution, it also get out that the Censuales had to keep registers in which the identity of the students was recorded, the place, the provincia from which they came, and also the expulsion, if they suffer expulsion. And it's also interesting the fact that these breves, these records, were kept and then sent to the emperor, who could choose new employees for the Roman Empire, starting from these breves, from these registers. After that, also from the novel of Justinian, mechanism of identification came out, because we know that when an expulsion was put into force, the quaestor, who was the magistrate who had a capability for it, had to communicate through letters, the mosiae, public documents written by the quaestor, with the provincial governors, again, of the provinces to which these peregrini, these provinciales, were sent back. So we have this type of evidence of registration, identification of the peregrini entering into Rome, but also to Constantinople.
We have time only for one more question. No more questions? Well, we have reached at the end of the session. I would like to thank everyone for their participation, in particular our guest speakers, who have provided us with a diverse range of perspectives and ideas to reflect on today. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you for coming.